You're listening to Clear and Loud, a show about finding meaning and purpose on the other side of shifting beliefs. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Ben Crawford, it is so good to have you on the podcast.
Man, it's good to be here. What a way to spend a Friday afternoon.
For those of you who have not yet been introduced to Ben, he is the author of the book, well, multiple books, but the book we're talking about today is The Courage to Share, Escaping a Cult, Finding Voice, Building Community. I love all those things. All three of those things are some of my favorite things. Escaping cults, finding your voice, and building community. There's so much that I'm excited to talk to you about. I just want to kind of go back by way of introduction to say that I first discovered you about 10 years ago. And you were, I think at that time, maybe not that far into or had just started your process of broadcasting on YouTube, like vlogging, as we used to call it.
Yeah.
Back in the Casey Neistat days of the glory days of vlogging. And I was just like blown away by your consistency, your vulnerability, like just the volume of what you were capturing and editing. And at the time I was wanting to do videos, and I did do a YouTube channel for a little bit, but I was always like so just amazed, like, wow, like what Ben is doing, like that just takes so much courage. I was going to say cojones, you know what I mean? Like to really show, you know, arguments that you're having with your wife, parenting moments, like real life capturing your journey. So I've been following you for a long time, been inspired by you. We've had conversations over the years. And when I got this book, I started reading, I read the whole thing, and it just like, not only did I find myself drawn into your story and your process, but it was like also just like bringing back so many memories and feelings for myself, you know, back in that, you know, that era of YouTube and what was going on in my life. And then as you're describing your experience with church and all those things, man, it was reading this book was a bit of a trip for me.
I thought it might be. I was hoping it was. I can't wait to hear more about why, but
well, tell me, I'll just ask the question, like for you writing this book, you know, you've done other books before, but was this like emotionally more difficult? Like what was it like for you to talk about this really intimate kind of part of your journey?
Yeah, this was very difficult. This book was very personal for me and very difficult to write for probably a number of reasons. One is, I don't know if it's my Christian background, my personality, but it's so much easier to write a how-to, like a prescriptive, I'm the expert, let me tell you how to live, here's 4 steps, than it is to be vulnerable and share like my story. And this book started off like that. It started off as a how-to.
Interesting.
Concerning like storytelling and evangelicalism. But it sucked, like that version of it. I wrote it and I sent it to numerous people. And I was like, this is awesome. And they were like, no, it sucks. And I was like, damn it, you're right.
You got honest friends, huh? I love it.
Yeah. Well, no, a few honest ones. That's all you need. And then, you know, the second phenomenon that kind of occurred was, you know, there's this thing that occurs where you're here and you're like, oh, of course I'm here. I've always been here. But then you look back at where you were 10 years ago, you're like, no, I went through a huge thing to get here. And this book is me. It took a lot of work to realize what like got me here over the last 10 years. Like, how am I able to talk now or share these stories now? But why wasn't I 10 years ago? And those are hard questions I didn't know the answers to. So that's, you know, I learned those things in the course of writing this book.
So you had to actually really go back and kind of access who you were at a different time.
Yes. Which is messy.
Like.
You know, it's like all the trauma and therapy bullshit like that, all that stuff is real.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's of course this memory, like trying to remember 10 years ago is hard. And but the book is the byproduct of that it was that work of
Mm-hmm.
trying to follow my own internal journey of being, of a storyteller, a communicator, or even just sharing. That's kind of the theme of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Why wasn't I at one point in time? And how did that change? And
Right.
so that other people could essentially either identify or benefit or whatever.
Right. One of the things that you talk about that I really related to was the different mindset for communication, which in your past was preaching. Like that kind of embodied how you communicated. How would you describe that approach? Like, what does preaching mean? I mean, I think people immediately think of a preacher standing up and teaching, but you used it not only as that, but also as just kind of a whole mindset of how you related to your kids, how you related to other people, how you communicated in general.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't want to attribute everything to my faith, although that was a very instrumental part of me growing up in evangelical Christianity. But I also, have an Asian mom. So there's, and I'm an American dude. So there's like whatever stereotype you want to pick. I found it very difficult to share things about myself. I found it so much easier to hide behind ideas. And in Christianity, that's perfect because you have the ultimate kind of idea, which is if you trust Jesus, you will save yourself from eternal damnation.
Right.
So I would go around under the guise of care or love, telling people this idea, and if they reject it as a Christian, right, then you can be kind of safe and say, well, they didn't reject me, they rejected Jesus. And that's what we tell
Right.
ourselves. And then we don't change anything. We just keep on doing the same thing. Like, well, they rejected Jesus. Well, they rejected Jesus. When really, I think deep down, I was like a shitty communicator because I wasn't converting anyone. I was just
Yeah.
I was just, and you learn, I think, at least in my journey, that preaching at people, whether it's any idea, is not an effective way to convert someone, or I noticed the theme in the book, to bond with them. So like, even if
Mm.
with you, if I'm like, what's your favorite restaurant? Well, Subway is the best. It's the most awesome restaurant. Here's 3 reasons why. That might be like, okay. But if I was to share with you this experience I had at Subway, be like, man, I went
Mm.
there and I ordered this, and that. And oh my gosh, the sandwich, when it just tasted, it changed my entire afternoon.
Right.
Now we're getting to a point where I'm not preaching at you, but you're becoming a convert. And Subway is
Mm.
such a silly example, right? But we have these things that are so much more important to us. So across the board, I just hid behind ideas of morality, ideas of, like I said, even people's caring for them. What that meant is like,
Mm-hmm.
I really cared about people, but telling them they're going to burn in hell and that they should trust Jesus was a very limiting way to
Mm-hmm.
either convert them ideologically or become better friends. And
Mm-hmm.
so the course of my life has been learning, one, why I did that, and 2, learning that there's alternatives to preaching, which is in the title of the book, the courage
Right.
to share. It's sharing, which I didn't know was even possible, and I probably was incapable of doing for
Mm.
a good portion of my life.
One of the things that comes through is that even in those early days when you were just kind of preaching a one-way message at people, that you had this longing for connection. Like you wanted there to be something real. You wanted there to be connection, and you didn't know how to go about that. And that is one of the themes in the book I felt was just like, what is vulnerability? Like, what does it mean to like really open yourself up to and show people who you are? And I think that, was meaningful to me because you talk a lot in the book about like confessing sin, and the specifically around the issue of sexuality, like, lust, sexual sin, those kinds of things. And I'm just curious how you would describe those settings in the church. Like there are a couple of scenes in the book where you're like talking about, being in a guy's group and they're going around and there's just like a way that everybody sort of shares, but it's like, it's actually not a connecting moment. It's like a very like performative, closed off kind of moment. And it was so familiar to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been in that same men's group. how would you describe that? Like what was taking place in those meetings?
Man, well, it's so funny. And, I'm not as black or white. I mean, I think it's fine to be black or white, but I think there is some connection happening looking back. But compared to what I'm experiencing in other places, it's like it falls way short. But, so what I experienced, like, you take the typical men's like accountability group, which when men say men's accountability, they're talking about porn and masturbation. That's like all they're always talking about. Like no one's no one's wanting to like stop being more honest with money or whatever. It's always dealing with like
so true.
lust and purity and those types of things. So, being a horny teenager or young married in my 20s, there was numerous opportunities for me to go to these types of groups. And I did, because I wrestled with this thing that I thought was destroying me or threatening me. And people would say like, okay, it's time to share. Right. And I'm like, okay, let's share. Like, this is going to be so wild because I've never shared these things. And then some guy would be like, I struggled this week. And I'd be like, okay. Like, that sounds like an intro, right?
Yeah.
But then the next guy would be like, I struggled this week too. And that was like it. That was like that was the whole thing.
Right.
And I was like, okay, so there is a share, like there is an acknowledgement that there is kind of a realm here, but no one, there was these unwritten rules that were as much stronger than written rules. That was like, you never said actually what you looked at, how long you looked at it, why you looked at it, like what it felt like, the fact that you enjoy it enough to keep on going back to it, obviously. And that was like a lot of the Christian realm for me. It wasn't what was said. It was kind of like what was not said.
Right.
And they would say like, let's share. There was this like, it was like this invisible ceiling that was like, it's stronger than iron though. If you went in, you said, man, I looked at Pornhub for 45 minutes and I checked out these 3 videos. Here's the titles. And,
categories.
Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would be, no one would know what to do with it. It would really, you would be shut down so quick.
It's true.
So something about that was really threatening. So, they say share, but I think it's almost, I don't know what the word is, but you know how you like give someone $1 to alleviate your conscience or your guilt or something like that?
Yeah.
It's almost like a place that allows a little vent of steam to acknowledge, okay, we are sexual and there is obviously all this stuff going on. There's something in our browser history. So we can say that we can say we're confessing, but we don't have to actually deal with the power of confession itself, which I think is actually a really powerful thing if we were to get into the details. And I dabbled with that way much crazier in my life.
I want to talk about that next. One of the things, just staying on this topic of that, that kind of men's accountability group. I mean, I need to acknowledge the fact that I participated in those. I promoted those. I wrote books about how, you needed to be confessing all these specific problems and, challenges with lust to other people. Spent years of my life in that whole mindset. If I lingered too long looking at a girl's butt in the grocery store, I'd need to like call my accountability group and talk about that. Didn't fast forward a scene in a movie, like all those kinds of things. Like I was immersed in that. You looking back now, like why do you think in religious circles that is such a massive focus for guys in particular, but why so much obsession there? Like when you think about the human existence and spirituality and, regardless of what you believe, if you just are saying, yeah, these people are coming together and they're worshiping the one true God, and then that is like the massive focus of their attention and energy. What's going on there?
Jeez, I mean, that is a meta question. But my like personal feelings on that are like looking at Christianity from an institutional perspective. I think most of it is kind of at war with our natural biology. From the beginning of saying that, original sin and that are the flesh, where you're kind of at battle with this thing. And nothing is more powerful in biology than sexuality, or important, by the way. And I'm not even talking spiritual. I'm just talking scientific. If a fruit fly has 24 hours to survive, it's going to eat and it's going to screw, because it's important. It's like, it's in its DNA code to do this. So if you're going to create a religion or an institution that is in competition to your biology, you have to mitigate sexuality some way. So instead of feeling it or expressing it, you have to control it, which is what
Right. You're
religion
saying
does.
because it is like this alternate power source of
Yeah.
motivation that actually competes with any, spirituality or
Yes.
religion that
On a
wants
female
control.
or a male side, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've seen it. The number one thing you have to address is probably sexuality with adults, at least, and get them to, when they feel this impulse, to combat it. Or whatever you said, like there's all these make the phone call, you write 3 things, you read the Bible verse,
Right.
whatever. There's unlimited tools, none of which I really found that effective. Although I spent my years going through, some pretty extensive ways of combating it. Probably more aggressive than most people I know.
Right.
Um,
Well, that's the next part of the story, and you describe this in the book, that somebody invites you to a Sexaholics Anonymous meeting, which is just incredible. You showing up in the basement of this church, and what did you encounter there, and what was so different about that setting and their approach?
So first off, like context, I go to this thing not because I feel like I have a problem, but I'm just going to like help these poor sinners. I'd always heard about like, who is it? Ragamuffin Gospel, Brendan Manning or
Yeah.
Philip Yancey would always write about these 12-step groups and how that's the place Jesus would hang out. So I'm going there like I'm the missionary guy, right? Going to go observe these losers. And I get there, and pretty early on, like in the first 2 sessions, I'm like, I could not figure out what was going on, because what I expected to happen, some guy would say like, oh, I looked at Playboy and then I jacked off and then I cheated on my wife or whatever. And in a Christian group, there'd be 15 things people would say. Let me pray for you. They would say, have you read this book? Oh, well, have you seen in 1 Timothy where it says like, don't da 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 da?
All
And they
this
give
advice, all these prescriptions.
advice and
Yeah.
prescriptions and
Yes.
comforting words even. Jesus loves you. And here there just wasn't that. And I was like, what's the point of saying this if you're not getting help? What I thought was help, right?
Right. Yeah.
So they weren't giving help, but they were also sharing things I had never heard anywhere else, because I told you about my experience in church accountability groups where people would say like,
Yeah.
I dropped the ball this week, or I messed up, or something like crazy
Yeah,
ubiquitous,
exactly.
right? That could mean I murdered 17 children,
Yes.
or it could mean I looked at a girl's butt at the grocery store. You didn't, and you never knew which is kind of the point,
It's
right?
so
Because there's kind of
true.
this
Yeah.
power and ambiguity. But in this group, the guys would say, like, not to a point where it was like necessarily grotesque or superfluous, but they would say, I looked at porn for 45 minutes and then I, touched myself physically or whatever it was. They would say the thing that they didn't want to say. That
Right.
was kind of the code. And I was like, how can these guys say this stuff? Because I've been in this group where all those things were true, but not, and they're Christians, and Christians are saying like, the truth shall set you free. Like, he is the way, the truth. Like, we love to say how important the truth is. But yet when it comes to certain things, we never say the damn truth at all.
Right.
So I was like, how are these guys saying this? And then, eventually I was kind of like, well, maybe it's connected to why there is no response. Like, because they actually felt safe. No one at the end was kind of saying, well, maybe you should blah, 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 blah. Which, regardless of what the blah, blah, blah is, it creates 2 categories. Like, one, I'm the instructor or teacher, or like I have it figured out and you don't. And everyone was just kind of sitting around sharing almost like as equals. And that, that environment, it really fucked with my head. Like, just trying to figure it out and be like, I know I'm better than you guys, right? Because I haven't left my wife. But how do you have this thing that I can't do? And I was like, and eventually, to spoiler alert, but I realized I wasn't better. Like, very early on, I was like, wait a second, like this thing that I always thought was like a side issue is actually the thing that's keeping me really trapped or limiting, or, maybe they're more spiritual than me.
Wow.
And when I say maybe, I mean, in those ways, I think they were.
And what would they say in response to somebody's story, or what they would share? What would they actually say?
They would say, thank you for sharing. as if the vulnerability itself, because I used to have so much emphasis, like I said in the beginning, of when you preach, you're really grading the message. So a lot of times when people find out that I'm not attending church or whatever, they say, "So Ben, what do you believe about Jesus now?" And I know I can see their little wheels turning, and they're like, if I answer, "Well, of course I believe he's Jesus Christ, Son of God, died and rose again on the third day," or I recite some creed, they're like A+, right? But then if I'm like, "Well, I think he's fine," kind of like Buddha and whoever, they're like F, right? And I know how to fuck with them, because there's always they're looking for the quality of the answer based on the theological soundness.
Totally.
And so that's how I approach this type of group, because normally if you say, "Well, I struggle with porn," you could even get graded on those answers. If you say, "I'm struggling, but I, pray to God, and I'm really turning it over to Him," you could, even if you fuck up all the time, you can get an A+ on the answer. These guys, their answers were all over the place. Like, they were not theologically sound. They didn't end it off with a little bow. They didn't end it off with "Jesus loves me." They just said like, "And then, my wife yelled at me and I felt like shit." And you're like, that's it? But so in one perspective, in terms of theological depth, it was shallow, right? But in terms of like this raw, honest,
human
power and almost like honesty, but in a level I had never seen before, and vulnerability. And this is the type of thing that actually created connection. It was higher than anything. I didn't even know this realm existed. So I started to see that, it wasn't about the words they were saying. Because sometimes, you'd have like 3 to 5 minutes to share. And sometimes some guy, he would just like spend that 3 minutes like crying.
Wow.
And, in a church, I would have looked at that as like kind of worthless, like you failed, like you were supposed to say something encouraging or, logic. I don't know, like, and people don't say those words, but that's you see what happens.
It's so true.
From the pulpit.
I mean, it's another example of how we really love our own words, and we really love preaching and getting things right in those settings.
Well, and it's what we know. It's a skill set, and it's, I think in a way, and this is what concerns me about the church today, but it's almost a status symbol when you have not necessarily a university type background, but when you speak like a well-versed theologian, like you can imagine the Pharisees did. It wasn't the opposite being like the street talk of the poor prostitutes or drug dealers on the street who are using the slang. It's not respected. And I was in that category, but I learned to not respect, but value this other thing that I had all the ability to, I went to Bible college and I could speak the nice words and convince people with ideas and put together essays in my head, but I couldn't say one honest thing like those guys did. So I was like, wow.
Whoa. And I'd love to we can talk about this maybe later in the conversation of how you even view the things that would be confessed, or whether that's needed, or, the kind of Christian mindset around sex is one topic. But in terms of the way that this, attending those meetings, those essay meetings, the impact they had on you, if I understand this right from reading the book, it was more about the shift that took place where you saw the power of truly vulnerable, honest sharing. And that wasn't just about sexuality, that actually started spilling into other areas of your life.
Yeah, I think I got lucky because sexuality is like the it's the big dog. Like, it's the linchpin. Like, people have the most
the final
secrets.
boss, right?
Yeah, totally. So it's like beating Bowser on 8-1 and then going back and playing level 1 or 2. It's like not that hard. So if you can be honest about your sexuality, both on, like, there's two sides, right? There's the sin, like the confession side, or there's like even the desire side, like the positive, like, I like this.
Which is so hard for, just couples to even go there as well, right?
Or individuals.
Both sides of that.
Yeah. And that's not even on the sin side, right?
Right.
So, and I use the sin, but secular religious doesn't matter to me. It could be the things that you're ashamed over, the things you have no shame over, or the things you've done or haven't done. Both of them are equally as difficult. So that was my training ground for digging inside myself to find out what secrets I had been keeping, how to share those and bring those out in the open. But once I found that I could do that with sexuality, yeah, that was just like, sexuality is one realm. But there were so many that this phenomenon applied to, whether it's, money is, of course, another big one. But there's ones that don't seem as important. I mean, I shared with you, like, even like how I might convert you or not convert you to Subway. And these are simple things, and
Yeah.
they seem kind of silly, but there's a way to be vulnerable, share like what I like about someone or something, or to hide behind an idea in almost every category. And I just found that I was hiding behind a lot of ideas, not knowing I was hiding behind it, but just talking a lot about a lot of ideas. And you know how Christian men, we sit around, we talk about, well, what do you think about, there's the whole theology, whether it's Calvinism or this and that. And then it gets to like missional theology. And then it gets to like, with startups and more trendy ideas, and I saw the park bench thing you were doing in Vancouver and all these other like more, they're sexier, but they're still just ideas oftentimes. Into like, what do I like? Or what's the scary thing for me to talk about right now with you?
Yeah.
Even.
Right.
And it's different than an idea.
That's true. It's so true. The context that you started doing the YouTube videos in, what was that era of your life like? Like, I know you post every once in a while now, but you were doing like, was it 3 times a week, like long form videos or more?
Yeah, it started off 3 times a week. Very quickly, we moved to 5 days a week. I'm pretty black or white. Like, I need to be all in for something to keep my attention.
You went all in.
I did.
How would you look back on that experience, or how would you describe that era of your life where creating that content and sharing in very real time your family's life, your own, personal evolution, those types of things? Like how do you look back on that now?
So a little bit of context, I had been in the church for some 25, 30 some years before this. And I had always wanted to be like an author or something, but I felt so much pent up something. I don't even know how to describe it, but I felt like I had a million books inside of me that were never going to be written and were nowhere near being written. So it was this, and that's a lot of pain, actually. I didn't know. I wouldn't have identified it as that, but I was frustrated constantly. I was like filling up notebooks full of book ideas, but never, I was never writing any of them or never even writing the first page. And so the YouTube thing came out of a frustration of I just need to create something like, or I wasn't going to die, but I felt like something inside me was going to die. And so my first idea was I had just read, what is it? Count of Monte Cristo, like the unabridged. It's like 1,200 pages. And I was like, I'm going to make a video for every single chapter. It would take me like 2 years because I thought sharing about myself was too prideful. That's what I was being accused of: pride, narcissism, stuff like that. So I was like, I shouldn't make the video about myself. That's too like
self-focused.
Self-focused. Yeah. And I didn't want to be the focus. But then I was like, man, it's 2 years and Count of Monte Cristo. It was either that or vlog. And I was like, vlogging just seems more, Casey Neistat was starting off at that time. And I was like,
yeah,
it seemed like I could do it. And I was like, well, maybe I could make it about the kids and the rest of the family, so it's not about me. But it just came out of this desperation of like, I needed to make something. And that was the only thing I could think of to make consistently. I didn't know how to write a book at this time. Like, I didn't know if I could. It was this
creative, communicative outlet for you.
Yeah. And I thought, I could film and edit and publish a book or a video once a day. Like, that's because I was in the video field, like for work, and
okay.
I was a little bit familiar with YouTube. So I was like, it just
fit.
There was a lot of hurdles still, but the format was something that I felt like I could do.
You've got such an interesting background. I mean, my immediate thought, if I'm someone listening to this conversation, like, what was this guy doing for work? Like, how is he doing these daily videos? And you've been very successful in business. You have other even books that kind of describe the story of your experience and so on. I'm sure some people who listen to this will probably go back and check out some of your YouTube videos and get a little bit of a flavor of all of that. One of the things that I was most interested to talk to you about, though, was this really unique, tight-knit community that you were in that was like this overlap of church community, neighborhood community, if I understand correctly, business partnerships. And that's what, in the cover of the book, I think you're describing when you say escaping a cult, like that religious community that you were a part of. Can you just talk about that a little bit? Because I think the specifics of what that looked like for you really fill out the picture of how hard it was to press through these accusations of, whoa, you're out of line. You're doing something that, we don't want or we can't control, and so on, with beginning to kind of share your own voice and share your own thoughts and put things on YouTube. What was that context like? And would you call it a cult? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. Well, as I already said, like I was pretty black or white. And if I wanted it, I wanted it all. That was kind of my viewpoint of a lot of things. So when I approached Christianity, which, I was raised in a Christian home, but when I approached it early on, I was like, if God is real, and if this Bible is true, if these things that I'm reading that everyone's saying we should base our life on, we should base our finances on, obviously with your history and stuff, we should base our sex life or dating, all of that on, which I ate it up early on because I was reading the rest of the scripture, which is saying, which at least how it's read by a lot of these communities is like, this scripture is supposed to affect all of you, right?
Totally.
And, you read these New Testament stories of people dropping everything and following Jesus. And I was like, if it's real, I'm in. Like, let's do it. There was no question for me if it was real even. I just assumed this is real. Like, let's do it. And so I pretty much kind of did, like, at least to the best of my ability. Like, we sold homes. I gave away homes like for $500,000, like, because I thought that this money stuff that everyone thinks is so important, Jesus says it's not. So like, it's not, right? Like, let's live this way. And one, I was always struck by, even from a young age, how, like I said, the unwritten stuff in the Christian world where they say money's not important, but when you look at how people act, it's no different from outside the church, really. The cars that they value. And I mean, there's a few tiny differences. Like, people brag about owning shittier things. They're like, oh, well, I got this at the thrift store instead of I got it at the mall, but they're still bragging about whatever financial status.
Now the hipsters do that unironically.
Yeah. So there you go. But I was all in. And so when I got enough money and I was making $1 million a year or so. And I was like, I'm going to start buying up property and let's live in this community that it talks about in Acts 2 or the Bible, or that I imagined, what people that were sold out for Jesus and didn't care about anything else did. So, we're doing Bible studies or meetings 3, 4, 5 nights a week with this community. And
when you say this community, these are people where you're all living in close proximity.
Yeah, they're living on our block and sometimes in our home, and for my marriage, from when I got married 25 years ago, I think we had 20 people have lived in our home. Like,
wow.
Because we always thought, well, this isn't our space. This,
right.
We're stewards, so we kind of had no boundaries. I mean, there's all sorts of like psychological, now I understand, like, deeper reasons why I was doing this stuff. But at the time, we thought we were following the Bible.
It looks like the book of Acts for sure.
Yes. So yeah, it was pretty intense. Some people are showing up to church once a week and be like, I adopt a moral code. That wasn't us. We're like, we're going to live every minute of our day and every cent of our dollar or paycheck is going to go towards this ideology. So the result was, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 families. And it's a little bit hard to define because there's like a larger group of families that we were tied into in the area. And it was all these ideas. And so when we started like the YouTube channel, or when we started living a little bit, leaning into it almost like too much, I could tell some of these ideas, people weren't saying it. They were using different words. Some people use pride. Some people use narcissism. Some people use selfishness. Some people use, it never quite lined up. but I could tell that there was some unwritten rule we're bumping up against here. And it took, it took a long time for all that to shake out. But when we started making our YouTube channel and eventually we got excommunicated from this community, we lost everything,
because that was your whole world, basically.
We had invested everything into it.
And like you lost businesses or
business,
kind of stakes in business. Yeah.
Business, family, relationships, people that lived on our block that we had, given financial incentive discount to and met with 5 days a week, moved without saying goodbye. And it was very
that's so painful. Yeah.
It really was. And I don't want to undermine that, but it was also the most revealing thing to me about what was real. Because then I could see all these, because those are all people, they all, the talk. They're like, oh, we're brothers and sisters in Christ. It's like we're lifers. That's the language that people say. They're going to love you forever. For sure. We'll always be here for you. And then you see it's very, so my message, because I'm around a lot of Christians now or people that are still in these communities. And I don't want to say like, oh, it's fake. It sucks. It's not real. But I do want to say it's not as secure as maybe you think it is. Because when I was in it, I was like, this is going to be here forever.
Yeah.
And then I realized, if you change a few ideas or if you see a few too many things behind the curtain and you start talking about it, you're done. You'll be done so fast. You don't need, the door will kick you on the way out. And you will never hear from some people again. Yeah. And I didn't know that at the time. I wasn't aware of that, how fragile things were.
What do you think of, or how do you think of the word cult? And the reason I'm asking you this is because I was having a conversation with my wife, Kelly, today. A lot of people who are, I don't even know what space you want to call it, post-Christian, deconstructed Christians who are shifting in the way they hold their faith, progressive Christians, whatever. In that space, I just have noticed that more and more people are calling past churches and experiences cults. And they might truly be cults. Like I'm, when you get into the specifics of what that word means, what does that word mean to you? Why did you choose to use it in describing what you escaped from? Yeah.
That's a great question. I chose to use it for marketing purposes because I thought it sounded sexy for the cover of a book. That's the reason.
I love that. That's great.
But more honestly, so that's a really important question, I feel like, because cult can be used. It's like the term ADD or narcissist, where you could just, on TikTok, you can just call anything a damn cult nowadays, for better or worse. But for me, so I was in denial, after getting kicked out of this community. I think like a lot of people, I spent the next 2 or 3 years trying to defend it to other people. I'd say, well, they mean well, it's not that bad. I kind of deserved it. I'm an asshole. All these things. So I was on that hiking the Appalachian Trail and I was listening to this podcast, called Cults. Like the podcast was called Cults or something. It's about different cults. Okay. And they reference.
And you said that so quickly, but you were hiking the Appalachian Trail with your whole family?
Yeah, that's almost a distraction. But
that's a whole nother story. Go watch the YouTube video. So go buy the book.
But now that we're down that rabbit trail, I had just spent the night at a cult. It's like called 12 Tribes. It's like a famous cult on the Appalachian Trail. And so these other hikers are saying, you got to listen to this podcast about the cult you just stayed the night at. So anyways,
my gosh,
we did.
Wow. Okay.
And in this podcast,
should we just note that if your church has the word tribe in it, it's probably a cult. Let's just say that's just
probably true.
It's just a safe rule.
And they don't allow coffee.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Well, no. So I'm actually looking at my book now because this was so important that I put it in the back of the book. It was like the only thing. It's been in the back of 2 of my books. But in this podcast I was listening to, they referenced this paper that was written by this guy that dealt with, I'm looking at it now, but it was like brainwashing in China. Okay. And so the article or this book that was written by this guy named Robert Lifton was called 8 Criteria for Thought Reform. So they were addressing brainwashing. It really didn't have to do with cults, but it had to do with brainwashing. And these guys from this cult podcast had lifted these 8 criteria for what they said are 8 criteria for a cult, because it's actually brainwashing, cult. It's kind of similar. There's this overlap. So instead of looking as a cult as like black or white, or like, do you wear the uniform? Oh, then it's a cult. Or do you have Kool-Aid? Then it's a cult. And you don't have Kool-Aid, so no cult. I almost look at it as this like sliding spectrum. Like even within parenting, you can have cult-like practices. You can brainwash your kids within parenting, like at a level 2 out of 8, but so there is these 8 things. And so I did a podcast on our own podcast like years ago where I went through our experience, and I just graded our experience on these 8 things. And I came up that our experience, although there was no Kool-Aid, there's no uniforms, there's hardly any organization at all, but it had 6 of the things.
Wow.
And it left us feeling we are so emotionally and intellectually vulnerable. Like someone says, do this because we're a church leader. You did it. Because you're worried about hell and sin and far more than you are about your own physical health or finances or anything. So that's what I use. I could go through the 8 criteria, but people could look it up themselves. Or if you could post the Wikipedia article in the notes,
that's great.
It's very simple.
Well, I love your answer. Thank you for dialoguing with me about that. It's a little bit of a leading question because it's something that I've been thinking about, trying to figure out how using the word cult so consistently, is it helpful? Does it actually water down the real problem with a cult? And I think actually the bigger concern that I have is, does it let churches off the hook that are not being called a cult? It's almost like, this movement, oh, that's a cult. And then it's like, oh yeah, okay, we distance ourselves from that. But in reality, you're doing many of the same types of behavior. You have leadership consolidated, it's us, them thinking, all those types of things. And so I think I love what you're talking about. Like, let's just talk specifics about where any organization is on the continuum in these different categories. And let's, grade it, if you will, and say, there's a lot of, you're leaning towards cult really strong, or there's a lot of behavior here, or maybe you're doing well in one area, but over here, there's a real problem. And it's not this on or off switch of cult or not cult. It's like, let's be honest about what's actually taking place.
Well, and also, I know this is a rabbit trail. I don't know if we want to go down, but a lot of ways, I don't have a problem with cults. I think they give, like, a lot of people want them. Like, because
they're opting in.
They're opting in, and I opted in. There was 30 years of my life I lived in this mindset, and it was very painful to leave it. And I don't know if I would have done it if I would have had the choice. We were kind of kicked out.
Like you had to get kicked out. Yeah,
I had to get kicked out. I don't think I was brave enough to leave it. And so until we're honest about both the pros and the cons, and the supply and the demand.
Yeah.
It's like, I've seen all the cult, like the NXIVM, the Shining Happy People, everything on the internet that I can find about both religious or even secular cults. I loved it because it shows some of the patterns, but it's easy to come down on the cult leaders and be like, but they're usually giving people what they want. So if you're really to solve it from a spiritual perspective, I think internally for me, I had to learn to stop wanting it, which was so difficult, because usually what happens is one cult, like Marcel, it blows up, right? And then everyone they go find a new one. They go find a new way to get these 8 things met, because they haven't developed kind of the strength to live on their own or to find those things in other places.
For sure. Yeah.
Anyway, that's a rabbit trail, man. But
no, I think that's really good. I think that maybe part of what's been kind of, troubling me or making me wonder is just like, does calling these different things a cult actually what does it actually accomplish? Does it reach anybody inside of that?
I don't think so.
Because when you're inside of it, you're like, well, no, you're not seeing all the good stuff. You're not seeing how warm and loving everybody is and all those things. And I think that there's something about acknowledging, like, hey, these are the benefits that come. This is why this is so enticing. This is why it gives so much security. This is why it's so hard to walk away from it. And I do think that any institution, any group can lean more or less culty, and it takes a lot of work to lean away from that behavior, because you You want to protect what you have. You want to keep people in line, and people are happy to stay in line. So
Totally. Well,
super
like I said,
interesting.
I was, the most valuable thing for me to ask on personal levels was, why did I want to be involved in a cult? And also, like, take it on another level with our parenting. How was I using these 8 practices to parent my children?
Wow.
And that's where I think but just calling someone a narcissist or calling them a cult is kind of just a way of othering people sometimes.
Yeah.
That I don't know if you were saying this, but I tend to think it's pretty unhelpful in the grand scheme of things.
What, tell me about your family, how many kids you have, and if you can remember how old they all are.
Well, I have all their birthdays tattooed on my arm so I can remember it,
Oh, that's
but I can never
amazing.
remember their
That's
age.
great.
No, we have 6 kids. We have 6 kids. Our oldest is 24, and our youngest is 9. And all of those were. I don't know if we had them because of the Christianity, or I don't think so. I think a lot of, as I've looked back on my transition through various religious kind of stances, is no matter where I was at, I think I used various ideologies to justify it. But the ideology is not usually the core motivator. So,
Interesting.
so we had kids, but
I
I think
think that is such a good point. You find the ideology to help you do what you want to do.
yeah, it's true. I mean, it's true politically, right? Like, people will defy rationale to defend the person that they want to defend. And it's the same with certain ideas. Like, so, I think I wanted to have a large family with my wife, and we were Christians at the time, so we're like, oh, well, the Bible says to do it. So it even like made us better Christians in the process. But I kind of think we would have done it either way. But that was where I learned probably a lot of, the book goes through a lot of levels of communication. Kind of, you started with the biggest of, like, the church stuff, like speaking from the pulpit or talking to a non-believer.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I learned that the way I talk to my wife or partner or lover, or even my children, was really affected by these same kind of things.
Ideas.
Like,
Yeah.
a lot of times with my kids, I would only say, don't wear the shoes in the house because it's gross, wrong, stupid, you know better, whatever. These kind of, like, once again, it's an ideology, instead of sharing it as something that's more of a having to do with me, or a preference, or something else.
You've described the book as a love story. What do you mean by that? What's the love story of this book?
Yeah, that was I slid into that one really backwards, because I don't fancy myself to be a romantic writer or person even, but I think I am. Like, when I was in high school, my favorite movie was Titanic.
I
And
just watched that for the first time last month.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'd never watched it because, Kate
'Cause
Winslet's
why?
boobs. Because there are boobs in it, man. Yeah.
My gosh, that's the reason?
Oh, well, yeah, that was like so
That's
taboo.
tragic.
It came out back when I was a pastor, so never would have gotten near that.
Holy
So.
crap.
Isn't that
Wow.
funny?
Well, welcome to the Titanic club.
I know. I had no idea it sank. I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
Wow, so heartbreaking.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the love story. Yeah, so I've spent so much energy in my life trying to connect with people. From the pulpit, from I'd go and talk to strangers on the street hours a week, passing out tracts to try and save them, things like this. And but I think the person, or the format of relationship that has helped me the most and that I've enjoyed the most is a romantic love relationship. 99% of that I've experienced with my partner/wife, Cammie. And so the book goes into incredible detail of how much effort I've spent to try and learn to connect with people, like, kind of at large. But really, the relationship that has motivated me and that I've enjoyed the most from this transition, or these tools, whatever you want to call it, is my love relationship, my intimate. And I say intimate, not just sexuality, but because I'm closer with her than I've ever been with anyone. And so so it's kind of this funny thing where, I don't know, you would think, like, preaching at people on the street would be a different skill set than making love at home, right? Like, those are two totally different worlds. But for me, the same thing that was making me shitty over here, so to speak, was making me unable to be vulnerable and intimate
Wow.
and creative and deep here. It's the same.
Mm.
It's the same thing. It's the same. As I was leaning on ideas in my relationship. So in a way, I could brag about how I've made better YouTube videos or books, but I don't really care about that as much. It's fun to sell books and to get 5 stars on Amazon, and those things feel good. But what I have to live in with day in, day out, what excites me the most is I wake up next to my lover and we laugh together, and we cry together, and we make love, and we enjoy a
Mm.
very different world than we had 5 years or 10 years ago. And that, I'm proud of that, and I'm excited about
Yeah.
that. And that's the type of thing that makes you want to cry. It's like,
Mm.
that's what the book is about, so it's kind of a sham, because I wrote it as like the war of art meets, I don't know, it's like a Christian war of art, where it's like a how to like make money because that's what people care about, or how to share your story or publish a book because that's what people care about. What I care about is like, I want to make love with someone and like look them in the eye and be known and have them know me like better than anyone. And this was I got there in kind of a weird way, but this was my playbook for how I feel like I accomplished that.
That's so beautiful. What is it about your relationship with Cami now? Like when you say we wouldn't have been there 5 years ago, like what does it look like now that maybe you would have been shocked by in the past?
Well, you know how I described when I went to 12-step groups and success looked like a certain way to me about what sharing was? It was like these, whoever could spit off the most Bible verses by memory and complex, you're like name dropping theologians and, all this weird
Totally.
shit. And so people would be like, whoa, like depending on how many names you could fit in, like you'd get like this code or this ranking.
Exactly.
For me, I think I've thought love was this like certain thing. It's like adoration or appreciation or loyalty or sacrifice. It's all these kind of like things where it's like, oh, I love you so much, I would do this, or I did that, or I busted my ass here, or I know this about you. And I think in the course of becoming more intimate and aware and more in touch with our bodies, I just don't have that metric anymore. And it's almost like this whole new other metric, just like that vulnerability kind of, I learned about that the first time I went to SA and I saw it practice. Like, I can't say I really adore her more than anyone in terms of any clinical sense or mathematical sense or objective sense, but I certainly am more curious about her than anyone. And I think she is about me. And I know I enjoy my life more with her than anyone. And that's not by accident either. I'm not talking about like Facebook, like, oh, we're at Disneyland. I'm talking about like, we actually have learned to find enjoyment in things that would have been depressing to me 5 or 10 years ago. Because there's certain things from my Christian upbringing where you have like kind of a moral failure, and it's just automatically depressing. No matter what it is, you have to almost feel sad. But some of these, just like you said, oh, that pain you went through when you left the cult was really hard. It was, but I've come to find even a joy. It's like a butterfly coming out of cocoon. There's like a funeral,
Mm.
but it's also a rebirth that, we don't know is happening at the time. Fuck, I don't even know if I'm answering your question at all, but
No, I love it. One of the things I felt when I was reading the book and finishing it up was you kind of gave this like just this like little bit of a glimpse of change that the two of you have been going through. You talk about the fact that, we're not posting all these things on YouTube. We're not giving every detail. There was this one statement that really stood out to me where you said, that in front of the wrong people, authenticity is a waste. It was basically this idea of, yes, vulnerability is good, but you realized with this old group of people that you spent so much time trying to win back and, basically get back into the cult kind of a thing. And you finally just realized, oh, actually, they don't deserve to see and to know everything that's going on with me. So it just felt like at the end of the book, you kind of just gave like a few sentences about where you and Cami are and ways in which you're changing. And you're not even like giving all the detail. And I was like, oh, I'm ready for the next book. Like that, this
Well,
is wild.
I think it will be the next book, you know, and I didn't write it for a number of reasons. I think one was because I wasn't ready to talk about it, and I'm still discovering it.
That's good.
You know, and it is probably really hard to talk about. Like even like how I said, like, you know, I'm a romantic, or I like Titanic when I was in high school. That was my favorite movie. Like that, those were things that I was like really ashamed of. Like I thought, oh, I shouldn't be this way. But
Wow.
you know, so that was probably the thing that got me with the Christian story too. You know, I loved what was that book? Redeeming Love. Did you ever read that? The
I
Francine
did
Rivers
not.
stuff.
No,
I mean, it's
no.
like she was like a romance writer, and then she turned Christian, so she like, you know. But anyways,
She would take like biblical stories and like
yeah,
turn them into, okay. Yeah.
yeah, it was like the Hosea, I don't know, Gomer story.
Yeah,
But anyways,
that's right. Yes.
but no, I was a sucker for. There's something. Once again, this is down the Christian rabbit hole, but I was like a severe mercy. I don't know if you read about that, but it was like this. It was like this for being a Christian. It was the most intense romance story I could get my hands on as a high school or, you know, early Bible college kid. And it was just about this husband and wife that like knew each other better than anyone.
Yeah.
I don't know, all that to say, yes, with Cammie, and not just Cammie, I've learned it with other people in other relationships, but especially with Cammie, this is stuff. I think that this way of thinking and living that I got from the church, or at least that the church reinforced, it seriously stunted my ability to connect with people, all people, and my lover.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've learned other tools and as I've got healing or grown out of a lot of that, whatever you want to call it, I have noticed not only my relationship with the world and how I communicate, whether it be, you know, I've had the job of communicating for Google and Facebook. I've been on their PR teams and things like that. But all the way filtered to how I communicate to my lover. And when you do that, it changes all your relationships. So it's so, in a way, writing this book is a pain in the ass. It was like 9 drafts and, you know, all that time and energy and all that. But in another way, it just rolls off of my heart because I'm like, man, I think there's people that are lovers out there that want to connect deeper with even their own lovers. And they can't. There's like they feel like they've hit some sort of ceiling. And I can relate to that because I was like, let's go, let's have it all. Like, let's stare into each other's eyes. Let's, you know, have the best sex on the planet. And I couldn't. Like, there was some limit. So that, you know, the message is, or the story at least, is near and dear to my heart because my life completely changed in the last 10 or 15 years.
I just having a mind-blowing moment listening to you talk, and you know, I got this from the book, but there's something about the way that you're piecing these things together that's really hitting me hard. And that is just that, yeah, all of these elements of control that we try to impose on ourselves, you know, we go to confession so that we can be like, I don't want to do this. I got to control myself. Our sexuality, like that whole erotic energy that's all about connecting with others, you know, even the desire to speak something out into the world and, you know, have this moment of communication, you know, we literally use the word intercourse for dialogue and for sex. It's like that longing in a context where the only way to do that is to preach at people. This is how it's done. It's almost like no matter, you don't even care who's standing in front of you. You just like preach in a certain way. You know, you're in a context of control where other people and you know, are all trying to control each other, the cults that we create and so on. And what I hear you saying is all of those elements, whether you're applying it to organizations or you're applying it to communication or sexuality or whatever, like massive implications for our intimate relationships. You know, our partner, whoever we're partnered with, or whatever that looks like those elements have such massive implications for whether or not we can actually break through. Like if I just preach at my spouse, that's not going to be a very intimate, giving relationship. Or even with, you know, the whole theme of confession and vulnerability, it's like, yeah, how can you actually have like an intimate, really powerful sexual connection when you're so afraid of your own desires or even the other person's desires? Like, oh my gosh, if they, you know, get turned on by somebody else. That's the end of everything. Or, all those things that like that fear and all those walls keep us from real connection. And I feel like your story is like this journey to break through those things, and it's super messy, and it's like touches on so many parts of life, but at the end of it, it's like the expression of it, the goodness of it is in this relationship with Cammie and, your kids and other friends and so on, but like most encapsulated there. And that's just like, that's so beautiful. Like I love that this book that started out about communicating ended up being this powerful love story. Amazing.
Yeah, I love how you just made that connection, because they say in I think it's an Alcoholics Anonymous thing or something like that, or maybe it's an addict thing. But when you drink alcohol and you drink to numb yourself from the bad feelings, you don't just numb yourself from the bad feelings. You numb yourself from the good and the bad feelings,
right?
Like unknowingly, the good feelings, right?
Yeah.
So with what you're describing, when you start living this certain way in the business world or the church world. And for me, the church world was the umbrella that covered it all. Before anything, you were a daughter or son of God, and the church mitigated your soul, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start living this way in there, when you go to your love life or the bedroom, whether you've followed the rules or not, with the Christian marriage stuff or the sex before marriage, you don't leave that way of thinking.
It's so
at
true.
the door. You bring it in, and you're living your life on, my ultimate kind of matrix for approaching my love life was all these like lists of rules. Like, am I following them? Is she following them? Are we following them together as a couple? And that made for absolute shitty sex, to simplify it. Even if it's good sex, it's still seen through this matrix.
Mm-hmm.
It's so weird, and I almost had to learn to be able to set that matrix aside. And I don't think it's all bad, but I had to learn that there's other ways to approach the world. And I didn't know other ways for how to talk to people. Now I can talk to them. I can preach to them if I want to. Sometimes it's appropriate. It's the best way. Sometimes it's not. And I can choose. So
Ben, thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. Thanks for the work that you put into writing this book.
So fun.
Oh man, I really do hope people will pick it up. I mean, people who have come from the same background that we both have, regardless of like, this is not an anti-faith book at all. So I just want to say that for all my Christian friends. Like, I think there's a lot that anyone would benefit from.
My first goal was to help Christians become better storytellers. That's what the book I told you was a how-to.
That's great.
So I was writing it to Christians. So I wanted to be respectful. And I was like, that was my first step with the book. Anyways.
Well, I really think you created something really, really beautiful. How can people best connect with you, content that you're putting out? I mean, they can just buy the book on Amazon, or do you sell the book on your website? What's the best way for them?
I do sell the book on my website. Man, do I have this information? You could find us on Instagram at Fight for Together is our family's channel. I'm not really active on there, but there's links and stuff if you want to. Okay. People can watch.
And I'll
YouTube
put links in the show notes for sure. Yeah.
Or Amazon, is just as good nowadays. But yeah, that's
amazing.
But I'm so glad you read it, and I'm glad that you connected with it.
I really did. And one of these days, I want to get out and stop by and smoke a cigar in your backyard and hang out with you and Cammie. So
let's do it.
Hope that happens one day. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks so much, Joshua.
Thanks for listening to the Clear and Loud podcast. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Our producer is Pam Cameron, and this episode contains music by Jeremy Yaddo at Music for Podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a boost by subscribing or leaving a review on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen. We'd also love your feedback on today's episode. Or if you have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode or a guest you'd like us to consider, email us at hello@clearandloud.com. You can also shoot us a direct message on Instagram. Our handle is @clearandloud. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.